Welcome, everybody, to Best Ball Night School. This is Ed DeLauter here with Jeremiah Retzlaff. Jeremiah, you're on the clock in a slow draft. What do you got cooking right now?
Here we have a big board. I have a 2-4-8-3 build, two quarterbacks. My two quarterbacks are Jalen Hurts and Anthony Richardson. So I feel like I'm accomplished. They're my tickets. I'm going to ride the ride. If it breaks down, the whole team's going to break down. So I'm in on Jalen Hurts and Anthony Richardson. My four running backs are Saquon Barkley, Trey Benson, Blake Corum, and Will Shipley. So a little bit light right now. Some guys we like, but they're a little higher on the depth chart than previous weeks, aka Will Shipley. We've been getting him as our fifth or sixth. He's now our fourth running back. Going down to wide receiver, A.J. Brown to pair with Jalen Hurts and Devonta Smith. So this is where I have the quad of the Philadelphia Eagles. And then I have Terry McLaurin, Adonai Mitchell, Lat McConkey, Ricky Pearsall, Jermaine Burton, and Javon Baker. So I have some rookie fever here. Then my three tight ends, Brock Bowers, TJ Hawkinson, Michael Mayer. So the situation I'm in, I want to add some running back. And I have queued up here D'Onta Foreman, Kamani Vidal, Isaiah Davis, Blake Watson, Cody Schrader, and Dylan Laube. I'm at pick 207. Which direction would you go?
First off, congrats on getting the Eagle stack there. I've tried many times. I think I've talked about trying before getting Brown and Smith, and I haven't been too successful with that along with Hurts, but you've got all four of them here. So congrats to you, Jeremiah. This team looks very nice. I also love the idea of this is the Eagles and a bunch of rookies. So the Eagles are going to smash, and this rookie class is going to be really good. And it's a very straightforward premise for this build. The theories are there for this to happen. With respect to who you've got on the board now, I know that you've gone with the rookie running back so far, along with Barkley. I am intrigued by Dylan Laube. I like him. I think you could get him a bit later, though. I don't know. Maybe it's just me not being aggressive here or being a wimp, but I feel like D'Onta Foreman makes sense here insofar as there's a theory that he gives you some stability there where you've got a bunch of other rookies on your team so far that are just question marks. We at least know where D'Onta Foreman is right now. He's on the Browns. You've got Chubb dealing with an injury. He's likely going to get some early season work. Hopefully he gets the early season work, allowing those rookies some time to ramp up and get themselves established with whatever team they land on. So that's probably who I would lean towards here. And perhaps if you want to continue along getting additional running backs on your roster, you hit up maybe one of those rookies later on in the draft. So I would probably go with Foreman here. What are you thinking, though, Jeremiah?
So now as I'm scouring through this team, one benefit of this Eagles stack, I got all four, the big four, Hurts, Barkley, Brown, and Smith. So I'm excited. I'm happy about that. I do, however, feel like I have this sort of cost benefit where I have so many rookies on this squad. It's almost overkill. What I'm finding, and we'll speak to later, I feel like I'm flying a little too close to the sun with Saquon Barkley at pick 15. He's been raising. I have him way lower in my ranks that I just made, and we can talk about those in another show soon. So I'm sitting here thinking that I need a veteran presence at the running back position. Like you had said with D'Onta Foreman, I know he's not going to be a Bijan or a Brees, but he's somebody who can really lift boats late in a draft. There's a lot of unsexy players that get picked in best ball drafts that really pocket in for just a handful of weeks at times, especially this late in a draft. I like the idea of D'Onta Foreman. You have the question marks with Nick Chubb, and then, of course, the inconsistency last year of Jerome Ford, and then you think about what do teams tell us? What Cleveland Browns have told us, they want a veteran presence. What Jerome Ford did last year, they may have liked, but it doesn't seem like they liked it enough. So I'm leaning in the direction of D'Onta Foreman. So I think I'm going to go with that click. Good with that?
Love it, Jeremiah. Add him to the team. Do it. So Jeremiah, unlike Deonta Foreman, who is a pretty boring running back that you could get late in drafts, there was some pretty exciting news that broke today. The Texans made a big trade with the Bills. They traded for Stefan Diggs, giving the Bills a 2025 second round pick. Where do you think, or what do you think about that move? How do you think it affects the Texans moving forward? In fact, why don't we do a progress report on the Houston Texans based upon that big trade and Stefan Diggs joining the wide receiver core there with CJ Stroud tossing him the football. So where are you at with these Texans and where they're going in underdog drafts right now?
So with the Texans, and I'll pull it up on the screen for those who are viewing. Granted, this is sans Stefan Diggs, but I have him listed. We'll talk about him through here. A very good move for the Houston Texans. This is going to be a tide that lifts all boats for CJ Stroud. But rattling off here, Nico Collins, 15.5, second round on underdog. Stefan Diggs, 22.4, second round on underdog. They're going to crater and pull at each other. Tank Dell, 29.5 on underdog, third round. So those three players, I think, are going to siphon off from each other. Tank Dell might be that third player who just squeezes out and falls down a little bit. I do think CJ Stroud can move up. Right now, Stroud is 61 at the 5-6 turn, along with Joe Mixon on his heels at 61.4. It's just a fractional score in ADP behind Stroud is Mixon. So Mixon and Stroud are both at that 5-6 turn. I like it. We've talked about it earlier where it's very tough to buy in on CJ Stroud because of the fact that you had to either get Nico Collins at a very inflated price or Tank Dell a little bit later. You have the injury questions. So it was a little bit difficult to directly hit CJ Stroud. If you took Stroud and you didn't have Collins or Dell, you were having to rely on maybe getting Dalton Schultz, who his picture wasn't clear until he signed. So there was a lot of vagueness with this back half of the Texans stack. So I really see this lifting the boat for Stroud. And it might be a little bit easier for us to get these Texans builds because you'll be able to pick and pluck at Nico Collins or Stefan Diggs. It'll be very hard, though, to get Collins, Diggs, Tank Dell, but it's going to be easier to get two of the three or one of the three, and you have a better shot at connecting with CJ Stroud. What do you think of the Houston Texans?
Yeah, so Jeremiah, I do agree with you insofar as this is definitely a big plus for CJ Stroud. I probably am a bit more comfortable taking him at where he is currently at in ADP. He had been sinking down a bit. I think he comes back up to where he probably was a little earlier in the season, like an ADP of 55, and I'd probably be comfortable taking him there, even though we did discuss that there is a similarity between him and some of the other quarterbacks that you get later in the draft between Burrow and Dak Prescott. But with the addition of Stefan Diggs, I think that brings CJ Stroud to another tier here, and I would be comfortable drafting him where I think he'll ultimately wind up going, which is, again, probably pick 55-ish where he was previously. I'm really interested as to how this ADP coalesces here between Collins, Diggs, and Tank Dell. I don't think Collins and Diggs continue to go in the second round here with respect to Collins going around pick 15, Diggs around pick 22. I think both of those guys drop down. And I think, quite honestly, I think all three of these receivers slouch down in drafts now because there's a lot more ambiguity as to who is going to be the target earner there. You have Diggs coming off a horrendous second half of the season. Is he washed? Did the Bills trade him because they think he's washed? We don't know. I've been leaning towards the assumption in drafts that he is, and that's how I've just been playing it out, because you have to start these drafts with some assumptions embedded in them in order to have some strong takes for the draft. So that's the assumption that I've been playing off of, but I could be wrong. Nico Collins has been going really high previously. He definitely, I think, comes down. Does he go below Diggs eventually? I think that's probably where he probably winds up. I think I can't imagine him going above Diggs in underdog drafts moving forward, but I do think that he's probably going to be closer to Diggs, but probably more like maybe like a, I don't know, like a 30, 35-ish area. I don't know. That's just a guess. Tank Dell, I'm probably the most interested in because I do think that Collins and Diggs occupy similar roles in that offense. Tank Dell, if he dips down to the 4th or the 5th, he'll be like an instant smash for me, like Christian Kirk around that area. To me, like I'd be gobbling him up all day there. So I am interested to see how this ultimately plays out. I do think that once ADP adjusts, there probably will be some value there, but I'm probably avoiding it where these guys are going at present, only because it's a lot of draft capital to put into one team here. And one of these guys, if they continue to go where they're going, is going to ultimately really disappoint.
I think another note on the Texans, and I'm going to pivot over and show the Bills ADPs, and we can talk about them a little bit because they're related on the other side. Joe Mixon is going to see very light boxes. He should have a field day. Also, and again, Joe Mixon at the 5'6" turn, 61 ADP. Dameon Pierce at 207 in the 18th round, a very valuable cuff. Again, he's a player who we had a dopamine hit. We didn't get near what we wanted, and now he's settled way back. So he's not a player that you're going to click on and have a huge dopamine hit, but he is a player who I think can be very valuable in the event that Joe Mixon isn't made of iron. So that's a good handcuff, upside late player, and it's at the 18th round. I'm going to pull up the Bills here, and we can talk about them just a little bit. Stefan Diggs is still listed, but we now have Josh Allen at 23, James Cook at 46 ADP, Dalton Kincaid at 67. I feel like Dalton Kincaid is going to go way up. In Dynasty, you can go and try and sell him for a king's ransom. If you don't get what you want, you don't have to sell. You're in the driver's seat. James Cook, I'm a little murky on. I have been this entire offseason, but we'll see how things play out at the NFL draft. Curtis Samuel, 122. You and I have been drafting him. We're very excited about that. I see people pumping Khalil Shakir at 135 ADP. I'm not so sure how high he'll go. All of a sudden, I think this is going to end up calling us back to all these rookies that we have been picking. Guys like Adonai Mitchell, Troy Franklin, Xavier Worthy, just to name a few. There's plenty more out there to be listed. Ladd McConkey. We'll see which direction they go. What's your take on the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, I'll be really interested to see how high Dalton Kincaid's ADP spikes. I would not be surprised if it starts going somewhere around where Mark Andrews is going in the 50s. Andrews is a value there. I think Kincaid will probably also be a value there. Even if the Bills do add a rookie wide receiver in the upcoming draft, that with respect to the names that we've discussed, it just is a reminder that it's really important in these early drafts to just take shots at rookies because you never know how the season's going to play out. The Bills look primed to add a young receiver there. If they stay there, they could even pivot. And maybe there's been some rumors of them trading that pick for a Brandon Ayuk or a T. Higgins, right? There's a lot of different ways that this can continue to play out. And I'm very interested to see where these ADPs ultimately wind up. I do think Curtis Samuel will remain a value because of the role that he plays in that offense, just the type of player that he is. I know that you said you're not necessarily interested in James Cook, but I'm actually pretty interested in him now insofar as if the Bills do add a rookie wide receiver. And let's be honest, like we like a lot of these rookie wide receivers, particularly the ones that we think are going to be going late round one. But like most of these guys don't really hit. There's no guarantee they're going to hit. Maybe the Bills wind up drafting this year's Quentin Johnson. Like maybe that happens. And if that happens, they're going to have to rely on James Cook a lot more than they probably anticipated. And I think that he could probably be a value as to where he's going. He was pretty good down the stretch last year for them. I think after Joe Brady took over, it was more of a focused offense around him in the running game. So it'll be interesting how that offense plays out in general with Diggs gone now and where things move forward with these Bills ADPs.
I like that a lot. It's a good look at what we have going on with the Texans and the Bills. It's a butterfly effect, and it's amazing how one player just shifts over, and now it has ramifications for 10, sometimes 20 players. And like you said, you were pulling up on tertiary movements of potentially Brandon Ayuk or T. Higgins. So there's teams for teams. There's just this web all over the place. I like how you laid that out. Did you have a draft you wanted to go over?
I do, Jeremiah. I'm currently on the clock here at pick 66. Presently, I'm working on a build that includes Jonathan Taylor, Justin Jefferson as the wide receiver one here. I got him at pick 7. I also have Michael Pittman Jr., Keenan Allen in the wide receiver room as well. And I've got Mark Andrews, who we did discuss. I do think he's a great value as to where he's going right now in drafts. I was hoping that Anthony Richardson was going to fall here, but unfortunately, Ron Stewart over here did snag him at pick 62. So I do have a couple Vikings in my queue in Aaron Jones and Jordan Addison. I could go in any other direction here. I probably would want, I ideally would want to add a wide receiver again, but I just don't think the value is really there at this point. I could add anybody from Kenneth Walker, Joe Mixon, who we discussed, just to add another running back to Jonathan Taylor. So what do you think about this build so far, Jeremiah? And where do you think you would go here? Would you lean into continuing to add Minnesota Vikings to a stack, or would you maybe pivot somewhere else?
So I like what you have with Justin Jefferson. We love picking him. Pick 7. It's a beautiful thing. You love to see it. The only way I would I said in a recent show that Addison I'm more neutral on. And I think that would carry here, where I'm neutral on Addison, although keying in and putting in Justin Jefferson makes me want to click on Addison on a team like this. I love what you have locked up with Mark Andrews. I feel like Mark Andrews is going to be a player who, just from sameness, fatigue, the injury, this thought of a shiny new toy, and say like a Dalton Kincaid or even Kyle Pitts, who we're over the moon for, you're going to get people who are going to fade and forget a little bit with Mark Andrews. It's all a dopamine thing too, how it just gives you a charge. And sometimes there is a sameness fatigue. And I think you can take advantage of that. And we'll see that play out in some drafts for Mark Andrews. I love what you have working backwards with Keenan Allen as your third receiver. He could easily be the wide receiver 1 with Caleb Williams. And he's not going to be dust. Even if he and DJ Moore are more neck and neck, I think they're just going to feed off of each other. I love what you had working with Michael Pittman and JT. It didn't work out that you got the stack with Anthony Richardson. It'll happen. But again, you'll set yourself up in the future and you'll end up connecting there. So with your board, I would click Addison. But in a vacuum, I'm starting to think, maybe for the theme of our show a little bit, in a vacuum, I like Deontay Johnson and maybe DeAndre Hopkins more than Jordan Addison. But I like the idea of Addison in the stack. But to the theme of the show, maybe with this Texans leadoff, Joe Mixon is the guy to carry for your second running back spot. Between Addison and Mixon, who do you think you like?
I think between those two, I would probably lean Mixon, particularly in a vacuum. I have done this build before where I've started Jefferson. Usually you could get one of Aaron Jones or one of Addison to pair with Jefferson. You can't usually get both because they are going basically right next to each other at 68 for Addison and 69 for Aaron Jones. I usually lean Jones. Mixon is definitely more intriguing, particularly since Diggs is now on the Texans. I think just for the sake of the show and for the sake of just mixing it up a little bit, I will take Joe Mixon here only because why not? Here, I'm going to take Joe Mixon here and we'll hope for the best.
Hey, it's provocative. It gets the people going. Just to review, before we pivot over to a Chiefs report, we have Jonathan Taylor, Joe Mixon as the 2 running backs. Mark Andrews is the sole tight end. There's no quarterback on this team. The 3 receivers we have so far, Ed has drafted Justin Jefferson, Michael Pittman, and Keenan Allen. So good team so far. Then I'll pivot over. We're going to talk about progress reports. We're going to talk about the Chiefs, and we have to lead off with the Rashee Rice situation. He was drag racing. He was involved. Was he in the passenger seat? Was he driving? We have some footage. There's a whole lot going out there on the Twitter X machine. What are you doing at his ADP? And thoughts on how this will play out for Rashee Rice? You're a lawyer.
I am. I will say Drew Davenport does do a really good breakdown. He actually does criminal law. I do not do criminal law, so I'm outside my scope here. I also don't practice law in Texas, which would also be outside my wheelhouse here. I think he has a really nice breakdown on the Twitter X, and he really takes into account a lot of these things. And long story short, we really don't know how this is going to play out. There's a lot of ways that it can go. There could always be some business that had some camera footage going, and all of a sudden there's some evidence of Rashee Rice directly tied to the scene, which could obviously impact things. At present, it seems as if the only evidence the prosecutors have at this point is that a car that was registered to him was involved in an accident that there was some drag racing in. Ultimately, I don't know where he's ultimately going to be. I don't know what he's ultimately going to be facing legally from a criminal law standpoint. And we have, I think, even less certainty as to what he's ultimately going to be facing in regards to any potential suspension from the league. Roger Goodell has pretty much the discretion over all of this. Maybe he has some indigestion the day that he makes the decision, and we've got a 4-game suspension, right? Maybe he's in a good mood when he's reviewing the case, and Rashee Rice faces nothing. I ultimately think that based upon everything that's out there right now, and granted, all this can change, based upon new developments, but from what's out there right now, I think that Rashee Rice probably avoids a suspension. At the very least, it might be minimal. He has gone down in drafts recently. He's at pick 30.4 with an ADP, places him somewhere in the mid-third round. I've been scooping the dip on him, quite honestly, because like I said, I think ultimately, I don't want to say that this situation is a nothing burger, because there's obviously some very serious criminal allegations involved. However, I think that when it comes to fantasy football, this is probably just a bunch of off-season stuff to pass the time, as opposed to anything that's really actionable here. So if people are going to react to this in a way that's going to drive down his ADP, I will scoop him up. Along with Rashee Rice falling, I don't know if Kelsey's been rising or falling. He's been stuck in this early 4th round place with respect to ADP. He's going off the board at pick 41.9. Holmes is shortly there after him at pick 50.1. You then have the running back, Isaiah Pacheco. The Chiefs just added back Clyde Edwards-Helaire to the running back room, which you got to think is a good thing for Pacheco. It's just another body there that he doesn't have to worry about with respect to getting any touches taken away from him. He's, again, going off in the mid-5th. You then also have Marquise Brown, who I guess, along with the hype of being placed on the Chiefs now has the hype going for him of this whole Rashee Rice thing. And I think you've got a lot of Marquise Brown truthers that are just driving up the ADP saying, oh, Rashee Rice, he's in trouble. Maybe this is a lot more serious than we think it is. And his ADP has been hyped up to the early 6th round. And that's pretty much where all of the Chiefs that are probably going to be most relevant for this year are all going. They're all going inside of pick 62, and they're all pretty consolidated around that ADP. So Jeremiah, what do you make of where the Chiefs are going off the board at present? Who do you think is a value? Who are you steering away from? And also, what are your thoughts on the Rashee Rice situation? Are you scooping the dip on him, or is he somebody that you're avoiding in drafts?
With Rashee Rice in Dynasty, it was Easter morning, and I was sending out offers, talking in Dynasty, 1-for-1, Addison for Rice. I had other different combinations. Nothing on Fear Street here. It's a terrible thing that's happened, but here we are with fantasy football. This is our escape. So we're talking about the fantasy football implications. What's going to happen is there is that dip already down to the mid-3rd. He was going at the 2-3 turn, 24-25. We talked about locker combos. He's going to be a little bit later in some locker combos that we cover in future weeks, because I see this dip kind of hovering a little bit here and maybe a little bit lower. It's good from the sense that now we can get Rashee Rice at a dip. However, when we were drafting him earlier, the people who are getting him at a dip now are benefiting against us. So that is a bummer, but it's not such a huge dip. that we're going to win or lose a tournament off of. So with Rashee Rice, I don't quite expect a suspension. If it is, it's going to be something light. I saw Adam Levitan talk about just adjusting expectations by about 10% down. And I thought that was just a very reasonable take. And if it's just 2 games, let's say there was a suspension, you've got the whole rest of the season where Rashee Rice will pay off at ADP. So I'm still big on Rice. I do like to think that when players do something off the wall, wild, that now that attention is on, that they'll rein it in. Take Jordan Addison, who I talked about in that trade, that hypothetical trade I was trying to send out. Jordan Addison drove, 139 miles per hour? He was speeding, something crazy. And I feel like once that attention is there, especially at a young age, the players realize what they're doing. And hopefully the right people get around Rashee Rice to where I'm more confident that he's actually not going to get in trouble now. Even though he's been in trouble once in this situation, I have this thought that, okay, a second chance, he's going to do things right. Now, with the rest of the team, like you say, Travis Kelce is just hovering in that early 4th range. Patrick Mahomes, it may be easier to get him, Rashee Rice, and Travis Kelce with this dip, the triumvirate there. Isaiah Pacheco at 52. I'm not overly excited. I've been glossing over him. With Marquise Brown, he's very high, way high. Personally, in Dynasty, you should try and sell him as much as you can if there's any Fear Street with Rashee Rice. Marquise Brown, though, I'm only going to pair him with the Chief stacks. I love the idea. You made a little note on our show sheet about undrafted wide receivers. This may increase. I do think that number 32 overall could end up being a wide receiver, whereas when the Chiefs thought they had something locked in with Kelce and Rice, now that might change just a little bit. So this might create an opportunity for some of those rookies to matriculate over to the Chiefs. And that's what I got for the Chiefs. I'm going to pull over onto another draft. And let's go to a 12-person draft. In this one, I have going on, I have 2 quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes, so we were just talking about the Chiefs, got him at pick 50, and Brock Purdy. So this is a Super Bowl rematch, right, for my own squad, except they're working together. And then my 4 running backs I have, Brian Robinson Jr., Blake Corum, Jaleel McLaughlin. I have not been clicking McLaughlin, so I went and clicked him there. I don't know how I feel. You never know until you click, right, how you'll feel. Marshawn Lloyd at pick 146. My wide receiver room, CeeDee Lamb. Rashee Rice, there he is at pick 23. That's a dip. I'm competing against the field. The field has me right now. Stefan Diggs, would you look at that? Pick 26. Now a Houston Texan. Keenan Allen at 47. Deontay Johnson is my 5th wide receiver at pick 74. I love that. Troy Franklin, I talked about buying the dip on him. Pick 119. I'm calling bottom on Troy Franklin. Roman Wilson at pick 167. I've heard people talk about he could be this year's Jaden Reed, just in his own style of brand of football. And then Jermaine Burton, I hear his name left and right. So you know what? I'm going to click him, get some exposure. My 2 tight ends, I have George Kittle stacked with Brock Purdy, and then Noah Fant is my 2nd tight end. So I've got a 2-4-8-2 build, and then what I could use is another running back. But then, of course, I'm not averse to wide receiver. In my queue, I have Javon Baker, Will Shipley, Noah Brown, Deontay Foreman. And then as my 3rd tight end late, I'm thinking about Colby Parkinson. Ray GQ has gotten me on Colby Parkinson. Shout out to Ray. And I'm going to be picking and plucking him a lot, Colby Parkinson, in round 20. So what direction do you think I should go based on my team and who's in my queue?
Yeah, it's an interesting build. It's a very nice 0 RB build that you got going on here, Jeremiah. You've got the 2 really just set and forget quarterbacks in Mahomes and Purdy. There's no real need to add there at all. Your first running back off the board was Brian Robinson at pick 95. Again, just great 0 RB build. You got the 2 rookies in there in Corum and Lloyd, who could flash some upside. McLaughlin, again, ambiguous situation in the Broncos backfield. I know you said you're not really sure how you feel about that. I don't think the Broncos are sure as to how they feel about Jaleel McLaughlin. So that could be a good thing and that could be a bad thing. But that wide receiver room is just so great. Chef's kiss, as you would say, Jeremiah, with CeeDee Lamb, Rashee Rice, Stefan Diggs, Keenan Allen, and Deontay Johnson. You've got just wide receiver ones on wide receiver ones on wide receiver ones with this squad. And then you've went for the upside here with a bunch of rookie picks later in the draft. I do think it's a great build. Insofar as where I think you might go here, I do agree with you. I would probably add running back here, particularly if you want to go Colby Parkinson round 20, which it seems like that's where you're leaning. So certainly you could skip over the tight end position because you don't need 4 of them on this roster. So I would definitely try to hit up running back again. I see you have Will Shipley and Donta Foreman in the queue. We just took Donta Foreman, so we can't be that boring again, right? There's got to be some other. Oh, look, there's other boring running backs here in Ezekiel Elliott. We talked about Dameon Pierce before. Tank Bigsby, who's been getting some hype too, although I think you're a non-believer in that just as much as I am. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of different ways that you could go here with running back. We do love Shipley here, or I think we love Shipley here. I know I love Will Shipley as to where he's going. I think he's a good value as a rookie. I would probably lean him over Foreman, particularly since you've got your boring running backs already in Brian Robinson and Jaleel McLaughlin, I think. So why pick another boring vet when you just add some upside with a rookie and hope for the best with the 0 RB build?
So in a vacuum, I am starting to make sure I incorporate some Javon Baker into my exposure. He and Jermaine Burton or Baker, Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy. I don't know what to do with my hands, as Will Ferrell would say. I don't know what to do with my hands with Burton and Baker. And now what I'm finding is Baker, he's getting sniped. Then I also have Will Shipley. I love me some Ship Sanity. What in a vacuum, I am starting to take some Javon Baker over Will Shipley just to build those numbers up. As Matthew McConaughey would say, you got to pump those numbers up. I do, though, see this room, a 4 running back build. I want to go in the direction of Will Shipley. We did speak to a little bit of Dameon Pierce becoming a little more interesting in these Texans builds, but I really like the idea of going with Will Shipley. I click on the running back position again, and thank you for confirming what was in my brain. It's a lot of dust around unexcitement with A.J. Dillon, Alex Madison, Ezekiel Elliott, Tank Bigsby, Izzy Abanikanda. I know some people are high on Abanikanda. I'm not in there yet. Kenneth Gainwell, he's behind Barkley. Dylan Lobby's another player. I'll highlight him. We're not going to draft him, but throw a shout out to him. A lot of scouts love him for his ability, Dylan Lobby, to run routes and be very versatile. But I am going to go and to switch it up. And this is part of the exercise. We have a volume of drafts. That one draft, we went with Deontay Foreman. Now this draft, we have the option between Shipley and Foreman. So I'm going to click Will Shipley, but I want to give a special shout out to Javon Baker and encourage the listeners to start clicking Javon Baker at his ADP, but really notice that within those 12 picks ahead, Javon Baker is getting plucked and sniped, and sometimes sooner. So that should just be a little key. It's late, it's subtle, but Javon Baker is somebody else that you're going to want. Javon Baker believes he's the best wide receiver on the field, and he's a deep cut, but a player who's drawing a lot of praise from many sharp people. But right now, I am going to click Will Shipley, and I'll review the team. I'll read it out, and we can head over to our pivoting and prospecting. I've got Patrick Mahomes, Brock Purdy. My running backs are Brian Robinson Jr., Blake Corum, Jaleel McLaughlin, Marshawn Lloyd, and Will Shipley. My receiver room, we love reading this part twice. CeeDee Lamb, Rashee Rice, Stefan Diggs. Hey, 2 guys in the news. It just happens like this. Keenan Allen, Deontay Johnson, Troy Franklin, Roman Wilson, and Jermaine Burton. And then my 2 tight ends are George Kittle and Noah Fant. I'm going to look for Colby Parkinson at the end of this draft. So I'll stop presenting.
I love it, Jeremiah. So you talked about it previously. Last week we did a prospect and pivot segment where we talked a lot about the wide receivers. So we thought this week we might talk about some of the running backs. So we're going to start off again with this prospect and pivot segment. We're going to talk about rookie running backs versus veteran running backs at their comparative ADPs and who you should be selecting when you're faced with that decision, because if you draft somebody, that means you can't draft someone else.
Yeah.
So I'll start off. We've got two running backs that are going at the end of the 9th round. It's Trey Benson versus Brian Robinson. I'm going to make the case for Trey Benson here. He's at present the RB1 in these underdog drafts, and that's pretty much because he has absolutely crushed the pre-draft process. He has an elite 116.3 height adjusted speed score per player profiler. You're looking for over that 100 threshold, I think, in order to really be excited about a running back, in my opinion. He also has prototypical size. He's 6 foot, 216 pounds. He has the profile of a bell cow back. NFL Draft Buzz, which is a website that I use in order to track where players might be going. I do have some dynasty leagues that occur prior to the NFL draft. And those are really fun. And you got to have a pulse as to where these players might be going, particularly when you're talking about running backs, because day 2 draft capital for a running back pretty much guarantees that unless they are absolute poop, they're going to be getting some really good opportunity there in order to establish themselves as a solid member of that backfield of whatever team they land on. NFL Draft Buzz has him going in the 3rd round, which is a day 2 pick. And I'm in, assuming he's going there. He's going to get opportunity right out of the gate. And he has both the size and the speed to really establish himself as, I think, a league winner at this ADP going outside of pick 100.
Good point on Benson, especially post-draft. He could shoot up a round and a half. Right now, pivoting and prospecting, we're going to pivot over to Brian Robinson Jr., one of those quote-unquote boring running backs, 107 ADP, end of the 9th round with Trey Benson. And this is just a good comparison. If people are at home and they're thinking, oh, these two guys aren't even close, it's amazing they're at the same price point. So take advantage based on who you like. But per player profiler, Brian Robinson Jr., 13.2 points per game in 2023, 22nd for the running back position. Overall, Robinson Jr. was RB21. He's being drafted right now as RB33. So there's a discrepancy there. Currently, James Conner and Tony Pollard are being drafted as the RB21 and RB2022. So Brian Robinson Jr. should be up there, or based on at least last year's performance. Granted, last year doesn't indicate this year, but that gives you a good frame of reference. He was number 9. He had 9 touchdowns, number 12 for the running back position. 10.2 yards per reception, was actually number 1 at the running back position. Again, 10.2 yards per reception, number 1 for the running back position. Brian Robinson Jr., not heralded as a pass catcher, was number 1. And he was number 7 in yards created per touch with 4.11. Matthew Berry, post-combine, was discussing something about Brian Robinson Jr. having a very big role in Washington. In comes Austin Eckler. They could siphon off some roles for each other. We talked about boredom in these best ball drafts. Brian Robinson Jr. could easily be one of those boring players at the 9th round that lifts your team, where people just think every round you need this sexy upside player, when Brian Robinson Jr. is there to get the job done.
Yeah, you started him off in that other draft, Jeremiah, as your RB1 in that 0 RB draft. And I think that he does make a really good like RB1 for a 0 RB build, just because of the floor that's involved with his profile and what we expect him to do this season. We're going to talk about some other running backs now. These are 2 running backs that are going off, that are being selected around the end of. I'll start off talking about Jonathan Brooks and why you should be selecting him. He's about at around pick 120. He profiles, I think, as a type of tournament winner type of play. You got to think about him as not as, I don't want to say that he's Breece Hall. All right. He's not Breece Hall. All right. But you got to think about him the way that you were thinking about Breece Hall maybe last year, right? Somebody who like is going to start off maybe a little slow. He's in sort of a timeshare with Dalvin Cook, a dusted Dalvin Cook, right, to start the season, and then just ramps up, right? And I think that's what you're going to get with Brooks, with whoever drafts him. And he's currently projected to go in the second round on day 2. He's going to have a team that's probably going to draft him to be the guy there at running back, and he could certainly fill in that role. He had 1,139 yards on 187 rushes last year with the Longhorns, 11 touchdowns at 20 years old. Again, he profiles as that workhorse back, one of the few workhorse backs in this draft, that I think that if you do take him where you're taking him, you've got somebody who could really ramp up towards the end of the season and help you really cash it when you need to in a lot of these tournaments.
I like it. So we're going to pivot over, though, to Devin Singletary, 114 ADP, end of the 10th round. There's baked-in health already. Granted, there could be a preseason injury. Unsexy players raise boats in best ball. Devin Singletary is certainly one of those players. Some of the pukiest teams pay off because the players at their ADP pay off just enough weeks to push a team through. So all studs look great, but players that hit that threshold of RB2 or flex spot certainly matter. Devin Singletary, RB32 in 2023 per player profiler. And RB36 right now, he's being drafted as the 36th running back on Underdog. Singletary is up 57 spots on Underdog due to this job security. He's just been trickling up the board. He's had last year, this is per player profiler, 5 top 20 weeks in 2023, 3 of them being in the top 10. So if we see more opportunity share as a lead back, we could definitely get some more consistency from Devin Singletary to pay off at the end of 10th round ADP. Now I'm going to prospect over. I get some young blood in here. Blake Corum, 128 ADP, 11th round, 19 total touchdowns in 2022, 26 total touchdowns in 2023 at Michigan, 1,400 yards and 1,100-yard seasons back-to-back. That's in his bag. Sign me up in half-point PPR, 205 pounds, 5'8", so there's no height concerns. Pre-combine, they were overblown. I remember hearing some people talking about, some Debbie people talking about 5'6", Blake Corum's 5'6". So he keyed in, clocked in at 5'8". We saw him perform against Alabama. We saw him perform at the highest stage in the national championship game. The Chargers, Cowboys, Raiders would be to the moon projections. There's a chance Corum goes to Carolina and splits with Chuba Hubbard. So I love Corum's slithery ability to work between the gaps and be judicious in popping outside when needed. Give me Blake Corum, and especially, I don't think he's going to end up at an accidental spot. So what's your pivot?
Yeah, so I think that you could definitely pivot over to Chuba Hubbard, who's going at around the same price or at the same ADP in Underdog at an ADP of 124.4. So from week 11 onward, Hubbard finished inside the top 30 running backs at the position. He's had that role on Carolina locked up as their bell cow. And I know that top 30, that doesn't sound fun. It doesn't sound sexy. It doesn't sound like something you should be excited about on a best ball team, but you do need these like solid innings eaters at the running back position, particularly if you go with somebody like a Jonathan Brooks or Trey Benson early. You're going to want to get these solid floor plays, and I think Hubbard profiles as that. If you look at that Carolina offense, they could take a step forward this year with Canales there as head coach. Bryce Young could take a step forward, and if Bryce Young takes a step forward, Chuba Hubbard's going to take a step forward. I know that there's some concerns that they may take somebody in the draft that might take his job or something like that, but they've got a lot of holes on that team. They may want to get another wide receiver for Bryce Young to help him out. They might want to get him some offensive line play to help both him and Chuba Hubbard out. They may want to address the defense. There's a lot of different ways that they could go with their draft capital in this upcoming draft, and I don't think running back is where they want to spend that draft capital. Capitable, which is also a word now. But anyways, with respect to Hubbard, if that offense does improve, he's probably going to see a lot less defenders in the box. Last year, per player profiler, he averaged 7.2 defenders in the box, which was third most last season among running backs. If that offense gets better, he's going to be an absolute smash at his current ADP, and that's why I would be taking Chuba Hubbard in the 11th round.
So I'll go over to a prospect, and again, those at home, you got Chuba Hubbard and Blake Corum. When you're clicking, you have some more information to make your decision. I'm going to prospect you on Jalen Wright, see how you feel about Jerome Ford after this. Jalen Wright, 137 ADP, 8-round jump post combine. From player profiler, 4.38, 40, 98th percentile, 114.1 speed score, 95th percentile. Burst score, 131.6, 95th percentile. 103.6 athleticism score, number 4 out of 20 rookie running backs. Just turned 21 in April 1st. That's no joke. Give me the guy who can get an outright job versus Jerome Ford, who already resides in Committee City. Are you in or out on Jerome Ford?
I will tell you to pivot over Jerome Ford here, Jeremiah, because Jalen Wright. Jerome Ford also has a plus 100 height-adjusted speed score. And unlike Jalen Wright, we know that he's got the wiggle to make people miss at the NFL level, right? Last year, he averaged 3.54 yards created per touch, which was 20th among running backs. In that Cleveland backfield, we know that that Nick Chubb is going to be missing some time there to start the year. Ford is probably going to pick up the slack along with DeLauter Foreman. I do think that Ford is probably going to see the majority of the touches there as opposed to Foreman, but maybe that doesn't play out that way. We discussed that. That might not necessarily be the case a little earlier today. But that's why I think you should pivot over to Jerome Ford, because he just gives you that stable play for at least you're getting him for the beginning part of the year, that he's going to be a solid play and probably be in some of your lineups. And if you could get somebody in your lineups that you're picking in the 12th round, that's a win.
So there we have it. Another point I like that you made is Jalen Wright versus Jerome Ford. Jalen Wright, there's no guarantee. We have to have it happen. We're drafting it like it will happen. You have to do some things before you see it. But Jerome Ford, good salient point about him being there in the beginning of the season. So there might be that early season, late season role versus the rest of your running back build. So the audience at home, you can pivot and prospect when you're drafting and clicking Jalen Wright or Jerome Ford. I'm going to pull up another draft. I could really use some help here at night school, some tutoring. The type of build that I have right now is a 3-3. I have no quarterback. I have no tight end. So there's directions that we can go. My 3 running backs are Devon Achane, Derrick Henry, and David Montgomery. And then my 3 receivers are Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle, George Pickens. So I have a running back and a receiver for Miami, and I have a running back and a receiver for the Lions. In my queue, I have, granted, I'm at pick 80. Tua and Goff are there much later for those stacks to cap. I have DeAndre Hopkins at 76, Brock Bowers at 81, Raheem Mostert at 88 if I want to continue on the Miami theme, Jameson Williams, 95, again for the Lions. Which direction do you think I should go with this team?
I would definitely lean toward receiver here. You've got a really solid running back room so far with Achane, Derrick Henry, and David Montgomery. I think that you could probably wait a lot longer to draft your next running back here. Your receiver room, solid. You've got Amon-Ra, Jalen Waddle, George Pickens. Great room. I think you should add to it here. I'm a big fan of DeAndre Hopkins. I see that you have him at the top of your queue. It is interesting, though, and I just want to point this out, particularly to the people who are watching this, that Jordan Addison has absolutely fallen in this particular draft. He's got an ADP of 68. We're here at pick 80. He still is on the board. Maybe if you want to, you could add him here. I know that we both are a little hesitant about picking him, even maybe perhaps at this price. So I would probably lean DeAndre Hopkins here and hope to hit on Jameson Williams later. as well as Tua and Goff later in the draft.
I like where your head's at on that. With Addison falling, sometimes we have to realize that we don't want to be the ones catching the falling knife. At times, I'll see a player fall just ridiculously 15, 20, and you're just thinking 15 to 20 picks. I'm going to catch this player, get massive value. Meanwhile, it's just somebody who's cratering. I don't think Addison will necessarily crater much further, but I really don't want to be Taggart. I don't want the hot potato. I like the idea of my fourth receiver being DeAndre Hopkins. He and Calvin Ridley can be neck and neck, mano a mano, 1A, 1B. So I like the idea. I'm going to click on DeAndre Hopkins, get him as my fourth receiver. Imagine saying that 3 or 4 years ago, that DeAndre Hopkins is going to be your third or fourth wide receiver. So now I have to queue up just to brush everybody up. Devon Achane, Derrick Henry, David Montgomery are my 3 running backs. The idea of David Montgomery becoming an RB1 in the event that Jahmyr Gibbs were to get hurt is still out there. All right, it's not something we like to talk about. We don't want to talk about Jahmyr Gibbs getting hurt. But in this game we play, DeMont is way high up there, standalone value, and he could outright have that job in electric offense. Here are my 4 receivers. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle, George Pickens, DeAndre Hopkins. And I'm going to hope to pair with 1 or 2 of both with Tua Tagovailoa and Jared Goff. So that's my team there. And then we were talking earlier, we want to compare a running back room from a draft that we've had before and talk about which one you like better or worse. And here's team 1. This was team 1 in the draft. It was Christian McCaffrey at pick 1. Big gap to James Conner, 72. Raheem Mostert, 97. Gus Bus Edwards, 144. Will Shipley, 206. So the 5 running backs on team 1, CMC, James Conner, Raheem Mostert, Gus Edwards, and Will Shipley. Now, the second team, which was 6 in the draft, had 7 running backs compared to Team 1's 5 running backs. Rachaad White, they weighted to Rachaad White at 43, Derrick Henry, 54, Josh Jacobs, 67, David Montgomery, 78, Braylon Allen, 139, and Dameon Pierce, 198. So to cap it again, Rachaad White, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, David Montgomery, Braylon Allen, and Dameon Pierce. For me, I love Team 1. I love the gap between CMC and James Conner, 1 to 72. Mostert and Edwards are aiming for the touchdown equity in a half-point PPR contest, and Shipley is the perfect pass-catching option late. What I like about Team 6, I love that they got to wait to pick 43 for Rachaad White. Rachaad White, Derrick Henry, and Josh Jacobs form a trio, 2 top 12 running backs for this build. David Montgomery, easily a 4th running back who could be a top 12 running back should Jahmyr Gibbs get hurt, as we spoke to in the last draft. We don't like to talk about Gibbs getting hurt, but it is a possibility. Then you have Braylon Allen, still a mystery box that could rise. And then Dameon Pierce, earlier in the show, perfect pre-draft cuff for one of the NFL's best offenses. So what do you like between the Team 1 layout with 5 running backs and Team 6 with 7 running backs?
I think from a process standpoint, I like Team 1 a lot better. I probably in most drafts are not looking to draft more than 6 running backs. I like the hero build that they have going on here with McCaffrey at 101 and then waiting until James Conner to hit him at 72 and then Raheem Mostert, Gus Edwards later as well. That forms a very solid core, solid stable, if you would. And then you just got to add Will Shipley at the end, just as a speculative, just hoping he lands somewhere where he's playing like an Austin Eckler or Danny Woodhead type role, how they started out in their rookie years. So I do, from a process standpoint, like Team 1. However, this obviously was a draft that happened very early in the season, just based on where these running backs went. And how can you not love the equity that you've got there with some of these picks with Team 6? Sure, Rachaad White's still going around where he went here at pick 43, but you've got Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs. Both of their ADPs skyrocket. Henry is going 15 picks earlier. than where this player got him here on Team 6. Jacobs is going 35 picks higher now. So those picks have absolutely skyrocketed. You couple that with Montgomery, who you mentioned before, in the event of a Gibbs injury, you're looking at him as the RB1 there in Detroit. That's going to be another, I think, nice contingent play that you've got there at running back, where he's got that floor, but also that contingent upside. And then you just have some speculative plays in Braylon Allen and Dameon Pierce. While I think that Team 6's process was not how I would approach a draft, and I think that it's somewhat flawed insofar as they really dabbled within that dead zone area, I do think that this room that they've got worked here is probably the better running back room. And if you were to present to me, hey, you could have this or you could have this, I would probably take Team 6 today as opposed to Team 1 today.
I like that. So just a good process. Both teams can play out. I just thought it was interesting that you had the packed-in 5 where there was a huge gap between CMC and James Conner. But then you had a team that waited and then had a packed-in clump of valuable running backs who have seen some rise from free agency, Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs, and of course Rachaad White, who has not been dinged by any type of free agent competition. I just thought it was a neat comparison there. Now, did you have a draft you want to go over?
I do. I got a draft that I'm on the clock now, Jeremiah. I'm picking here at pick 203. I've got pretty much most of my team squared away here. We're starting off with a quarterback room of Jordan Love, Matthew Stafford, and Aaron Rodgers. And then at running back, we've got Kyron Williams, who I usually don't click on, but I clicked on him here because you just got to get some exposure. So Kyron Williams, Aaron Jones, Chuba Hubbard, who we discussed previously, Braylon Allen, and Keaton Mitchell at the running back position. We then have Garrett Wilson to pair with Rodgers, Cooper Kupp to pair with Stafford and Kyron Williams. So we got some Jets and some Rams here. Christian Watson to pair with Jordan Love. And then we got Xavier Worthy, Tyler Lockett, Rashard Bateman. And then we went bully tight end here, taking Laporta at pick 35, and then Andrews, who fell to pick 59, which is just anytime like a 60 is like close to Mark Andrews, that's just like an auto pick. Even if there's somebody there that like may make more sense from a process standpoint with respect to getting a build or a stack. I think here, I'm not sure who is available at pick 59. Getting Andrews there to me is just how you would approach this almost 10 out of 10 times. So I've got some players in the queue here. I do want to go receiver, or alternatively, I could add Tucker Kraft, but I would rather wait on him a little later, hoping he might fall, only because I do have Laporta and Andrews here. I probably could, if I wanted to, just keep those two and be done with the tight end position. So I've got some players here. You talked about Javon Baker before. I do agree with you insofar as between him and Burton, I do find myself clicking on those two like later in drafts, only because they have gotten some hype. There's some of these later round wide receivers that people are talking about that may make some headway. Also, in a similar vein, we've got Malik Washington, who's also another one of these wide receivers who could go day 2 or early day 3 that might get some buzz. And then we've got some of the like interesting vets. Tyler Boyd recently was in the news. I think the Niners are rumored to potentially bring him in. And then I also have Alan Lazard here, only because I have Rodgers and Garrett Wilson already on the squad. I missed out on Mike Williams, but Mike Williams, if he stays healthy, there's to me, like he might still not be worth that gamble as to where he's going in drafts. So what do you think of this build so far, Jeremiah? And where do you think we might be going here with our next pick, or this team's next pick at pick 203?
So good job on your 3 quarterbacks, Love, Stafford, Rodgers. If you're going to clump 3, I think that's a good clump of 3 to go for. You're a bully. We talked about earlier with Mark Andrews. He's going to be that sameness fatigue player, tight end position. While we have Dalton Kincaid's, Kyle Pitts, we love those players, but we need to still love Mark Andrews. So if Mark Andrews is going to be the guy to dip, sign me up. So you're at night school, you're a bully. So that's how you got here. Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews, we'll set and forget with that. Although I do like the idea of Tucker Kraft as a tight end in future builds, Packer builds, but we'll stay away there. I really want to go Javon Baker. We opted against him in a prior draft. Here we are in theory and in practice. I think we click Javon Baker here and set it up for our next pick.
I agree with you, Jeremiah, and I will be adding Javon Baker to the squad right now.
Well, last week we talked about locker combos. And do you remember your locker combo? The first week we did just a couple different drafts. Last week we did a same draft. And this week, what we have set up, we did it from a same draft. People seem to like that. And now what we did, instead of 1 to 12, we've gone 11 and 12 and dialed back. So Ed, what do you got?
So Jeremiah, would you prefer to open your locker with Garrett Wilson at pick 11, Nico Collins at pick 14, and Jalen Hurts at pick 35, or AJ Brown at pick 12, Devon Achane at pick 13, or Rome Odunze at pick 36?
So it looks like a broken Eagles stack, and the pivot was to Odunze, and that's because I drafted this team with the Diggs trade. Give me AJ Brown, Achane, and Odunze. Odunze may get drafted by the Bills if the Bills trade up. Plus, I'm also biased. It's my team. AJ Brown, Devon Achane, Rome Odunze, 12, 13, 36, unlocked.
Next up, we've got Bijan Robinson at pick 10, DJ Moore at pick 15, Jalen Waddle at pick 34, or Jahmyr Gibbs at pick 9, Jonathan Taylor at pick 16, and Drake London at pick 33. What combination are you using to open your locker here, Jeremiah?
I don't love JT. I've got him further down on my ranks, but give me Gibbs, JT, London as number ones on their own teams at their respective positions. DJ Moore with Keenan Allen and Waddle with Tyreek. It's not a surefire lock for each of them respectively to be the number one in their respective offenses. So give me Jahmyr Gibbs, JT, Jonathan Taylor, Drake London, 9, 16, 33 unlocked.
Next locker combination we've got here is Breece Hall, pick 7, Marvin Harrison Jr. at pick 18, Malik Neighbors at pick 31, or alternatively, Puka Nacua at pick 8, Kyron Williams at pick 17, and Michael Pittman at pick 32. What are you using to unlock your locker here, Jeremiah?
Give me Puka Kyron to stack later with Stafford. No one will snipe that for Stafford. Pittman with A-Rich is also an attainable stack, so give me this start. Marvin Harrison Jr. and Neighbors, their present stacking, it's a challenge right now because as much as we want to line up with Marvin Harrison Jr., with Kyler Murray, or Malik Neighbors with the Chargers or the Giants, you just don't know until it happens. So give me something that's locked to unlock in Puka, Kyron, Michael Pittman Jr., 8, 17, 32 unlocked. Now I'm going to pivot over to you, Ed. We have Jamar Chase, Brendan Ayuk, Saquon Barkley, 5, 20, 29. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devontae Adams, DK Metcalf, 6, 19, 30. Where are you at?
I will take the Chase, Ayuk, Barkley side for sure. You got two wide receiver ones on their respective teams. Even if Ayuk does go somewhere else, he's still going to be the alpha dog no matter where he goes. It does set you up for a nice stack later on with Purdy and Burrow. You could probably use those two guys as the two quarterbacks in your build and use another draft pick for another position and not go three quarterbacks. So I do like that. And then Barkley, you've got a hero build that you could start here in the third round with Barkley. So I do like that the best. Lock it in, and that's how I'm unlocking my locker here.
Let's go with Justin Jefferson, Rashee Rice, Tank Dell, 3, 22, 27. Tyreek Hill, Josh Allen, Mike Evans, 4, 21, 28.
I'm going to go with Tyreek Hill, Josh Allen, and Mike Evans. I think those players provide huge spike week potential, particularly with Tyreek and Mike Evans. Josh Allen as well. He's going to be hitting his big spike weeks, particularly with his legs. He has done that before, and he's the QB1 going off in underdog drafts for that reason. I will take them over Justin Jefferson, Rashee Rice, and Tank Dell. Dell takes a hit because of the Diggs trade, which just happened. Rashee Rice has got some other issues going on as well. And Justin Jefferson needs a quarterback right now. So I will lock it in with Tyreek Hill, Josh Allen, and Mike Evans.
Very nice. Let me get CMC, Stefan Diggs, Chris Olave, 124.25. CD Lamb, Deebo Samuel, Travis Etienne, 223.26. What do you got?
This is tough, even with Diggs in Houston now, because CMC is right there. It's just so hard to pass him up. But I will here, and I will unlock my locker with CD Lamb, Deebo Samuel, and Travis Etienne. You get CD Lamb as the alpha dog here. Deebo with the occasional spike weeks, although he's hard to trust, but this is best ball. So it's not like we have to choose when to put him in our lineup. We can just ride the wave with him, scoring points and cashing in on some of the spike weeks there. And then with Travis Etienne, we could start a hero build with him in the third round. I sort of like starting anytime you could start a hero build in the third round, I'm all for it. So that's why I will unlock my locker here with CD Lamb, Deebo Samuel, and Travis Etienne.
Hey, so if you forget your combination, we'll just practice this on a weekly basis. We just unlocked our locks. Now let's pretend we're in the fast draft streets. I have a pick right now. I'm up. I have 2 hours left. We're not pressed for time, but I do have Garrett Wilson. And then wrap around. I'm back. I have the next pick. Here up in my queue, I've got Kyren Williams, who I've been out on. Marvin Harrison Jr., who I feel is inflated, Drake London, Devon Achane, and Brandon Ayuk. I'm not feeling, I haven't queued up Nico Collins or Saquon Barkley. I feel like Barkley is flying too close to the sun, and I will go over that in the next segment. Nico Collins just got the hit from Stefan Diggs. So do I go bullish on Achane and London, who I've been crazy about, but am I going too crazy? Is it too expensive, inflated to go Marvin Harrison Jr.? Should I just keep the sense and go Kyren Williams? What do you think?
Man, I also am somewhat out on Kyren. I do think here, though, you could take him if you really wanted to. He's dropped. He's about an ADP, so I guess he hasn't really dropped too far. But if you want to get some exposure, you could take him here. To answer the question that you posed here, no, I don't think that you taking London here is too crazy at all. I think that by the time we're drafting in September, he's probably going right around here, or if not in the first round, I think. You could definitely take London here. Marvin Harrison, I know that you're maybe a little squeamish on this high. I am not. I'm taking Marvin Harrison here. I do have some builds where I do have Garrett Wilson and Marvin Harrison Jr. on them. So either one of these ways or directions, I think you could go. Achane, I'm just not a huge fan of. We might talk about that a little bit later. Whoever you want to pick here between Kyren Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Drake London, I don't think you could necessarily go wrong, although I think Drake London, you're probably going less wrong than all the other ones.
Oh, okay. So that's going to put me over the top. As you were talking, I was open to Kyren and then Harrison Jr., but just, hey, you know what? You don't have to twist the arm too much. So I'm going to go and pair and share Garrett Wilson with Drake London. So I'll stop sharing that. And then let's talk about dirty gym clothes. Do you ever remember leaving your gym clothes in the locker and they smelled worse and worse? Now I'm talking about right now, we're going to talk tonight, which ADPs do we think are set up to linger too high for too long and maybe smell real bad by the time we get to the season rolling around? For me, Saquon Barkley, his ADP is inflating. I've enjoyed two builds where I got the 4 Eagles of A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley, Hurts, and Devonta Smith. Aside from that, I am feeling more hesitant for Saquon and feel like he's flying too close to the sun. At 16 ADP round 2, I have 17% exposure and am looking to flatten and really pivot out in favor of a lot more other players at the ADP. So get me out of Saquon Barkley. All right, I need to change my locker there for my gym clothes. Switching it out, getting out Saquon Barkley. Sam Laporta, is there repeatability? 33 ADP round 3. Kelsey's there at 41. Trey McBride at 50. Mark Andrews, 53, being left up to the 60s sometimes. Kyle Pitts, 63, up on the heels. It isn't unreasonable to cluster those tight ends in the same tier as Sam Laporta. Then you have Dalton Kincaid at 67, who's rocket shipping up based off today's news with Stefan Diggs. Kittle at 70, Evan Engram at 76. They're all cost-effective tight ends, 40-ish picks later than Sam Laporta. I have 21% exposure of Sam Laporta. I will flatten to raise other tight end exposures, so think McBride, Kincaid, Ingram, and down the line. The war choices will have me pivoting to other wide receivers here, so that's wins above replacement. I will still click for Lion stacks, but just a lot less. So going back to war, I've been following the Destination Devi crew, everything they've been talking about war, wins above replacement, who you pick at one part of the draft, and their positional value. So just in viewing some of their stuff, and you should all check that out, Destination Devi, Ray GQ and Scott Connor and the like, a whole good group of guys there. I love being over in that community all the time. So shout out to all of you guys. Love you a ton. Sam Laporta, I'm getting out. Jaden Reed, my last one, and I'll pivot over to you. At 56, the Packers' weapons have a very flat target share. I am wary of anyone getting 20% target share with ease. Reed is the most expensive Packers wide receiver. The Packers wide receivers down the line are safer bets with less risk baked in. I'm not a fan of Christian Watson this year, but I have 3% Reed and 1% Watson. That's on 52 teams, and it's rising. I have about 15 outstanding. Dontavian Wicks at 144 and Romeo Doubs a little earlier at 98. I feel like are smarter best ball plays. So for me at school here, I need to get smarter and start drafting more Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Doubs instead of Jaden Reed. How about for you, Ed?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the points that you make there, Jeremiah, regarding those players, particularly Barkley and Laporta. For me, my stinky gym clothes, and I certainly remember those days fondly. My stinky gym clothes include Nico Collins, who we talked about previously being affected by the Stefan Diggs trade. I'll be interested to see where his ADP falls, but even setting Diggs aside, his ADP where it was just didn't make much sense. I have dabbled with taking Nico Collins just for the sake of getting some exposure with the hopes of getting CJ Stroud stacked with him later. That's really the only way that I'd be taking Nico Collins previously, is if I'm forcing myself to take Stroud. You don't really like to force yourself in one direction or another in these drafts. You want to remain flexible, and that's why it stinks. The other reason why it also stinks is because if you look at the splits between both Nico Collins and Tank Dell when they're both healthy, pretty similar output here. Those guys should all be going around the same spot. I think that with Diggs added there, quite honestly, all three of those guys should probably be viewed in the same tier. And that's why I do think that they'll probably all sink down boards just a little bit. And for right now, if Nico Collins doesn't sink with this Stefan Diggs news, I will be hoping that I get another locker, because that one stinks with a bunch of dirty gym clothes. Another situation that I've been avoiding as well, I know that you've talked about A-Chain previously and how you like him. I can't wrap my head around this one. He's going early second round. And if you want to set aside that Denver game, let's just take that out of the equation, because that was like, there are going to be many games next year where a team is scoring 70 points against another team, right? That happens very rarely. I think if you just set that out and you look at the opportunities that he got, that's last season. You've got week 4, he had 11 total touches. Week 5, 12 touches. Week 13, all right, great. He got 21 touches that week. Good job. That maybe he'll pay off that week with where you're taking him in the second round. Week 14, again, you're looking at 16 touches. Okay, maybe he'll pay off there. But then you drop down to week 16, 10 touches. Week 17, you're looking at, again, 18 touches. But then week 18, you've got 11 touches there. So you're looking at a guy that's probably going to get somewhere between 10 to 15 touches, probably a game. I just can't sell myself on taking him where he's going in drafts. Particularly, we talked about that other draft. You're going to be passing up some prime players there with Drake London, with Kyron, if you're into him. I'm not really into him too much, but I would rather be taking a player like, I know that we don't really, or you said before, Jeremiah, that you're not really big on Barkley or JT. I honestly would probably take both of those guys over A-Chain for sure. I don't really see the love with A-Chain right now in drafts, and he's somebody that stinks in my locker. The other player that I want to talk about is similar to the player that you talked about in Jaden Reed insofar as he's a year 2 wide receiver. Zay Flowers, to me, his ADP just doesn't make any sense. If you look at how he performed post Mark Andrews' injury, he was an amazing player. He scored double-digit fantasy points in 5 to 6 weeks. But prior to Andrews being hurt, there were only 2 double-digit fantasy performances. Those ADPs for me, they should be flipped. We've talked about how Andrews, we both agree, I think, is a value in drafts. And the reason why he is because, to me, his ADP, along with Zay Flowers' ADP, should be flip-flopped. Zay Flowers is going off at pick 47. Andrews is in the 50s. That should be reversed, in my opinion, and that's why I'm looking to avoid Zay Flowers in drafts. Jeremiah, do you have another draft you're working on? Because I got one on the clock here as well. If you got,
do you want to pull yours up?
You know what? Let's just pull mine up only because it is the same draft that we worked on before.
Oh, cool.
Because we were at the turn. We took Javon Baker here. We are back here with pick 206. Russell Wilson and Noah Fant went off the board after we took Javon Baker. Gentleman named Expert Mike took him. Good job by Expert Mike, getting some value there. So we've got a similar queue here as to what we had previously. We have another rookie wide receiver in Malik Washington, who I'm probably leaning towards taking just to add to this wide receiver room. I've got a build, again, just to refresh everyone's recollection. It's a 3-5-7-2 build. We've got 3 more picks to go. So I probably want to add at least 1 more running back and probably 2 more wide receivers, and I'd be pretty happy here. What do you think about this team here, Jeremiah? We already recapped the build, so we don't need to necessarily do that again, but what do you think about the players that we've got lined up in the queue?
Going off of Javon Baker, we were so happy to get him. He's getting sniped and plucked. Malik Washington is another player who, look, in these exercises, we talk every week about who to get here. At a certain point, you're going to have to slice it up. Because if you don't slice it up and you don't have volume, you will not get every player that you do want. So prior weeks, we have talked about Malik Washington. What's really fun about this is we've been hyping up and talking about Jermaine Burton and Javon Baker. Malik Washington is one of those players. And the beauty is we love them both in Baker and Washington, and they're both available to take and to have. So here you go. What I like, you really, versus an earlier draft where I had a lot of rookies, you have just Xavier Worthy and Javon Baker as rookies. Here you have some solid veterans. So I like the idea of leaning into another rookie. I think you take a shot at Malik Washington and then call it a day.
All right. I agree with you here, Jeremiah. Let's do that. We'll add Malik Washington to the team.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for being here this week. We love your time. There's so much stuff that you could do. And the fact that you spend your hour plus with us really means a lot. A whole lot of news that rattled off this week, whether it was Rashee Rice or this Diggs trade. We love that. Upcoming, we have the NFL draft. So there's so much to look forward to. And thank you from the bottom of our hearts for joining us. Until next week, peace.